Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe now for quality horror narrations on YouTube. Please make sure to hit the thumbs up button. Make sure to hit the bell so you're notified of all my new weekly uploads. The more likes this video gets, the more YouTube will recommend it to other people, so please be sure to like this video. Comment below and introduce yourself, and I will be sure to respond. If you want to be featured on an upcoming video, email me. My email will be in the description box below. Sit back, relax, enjoy this video. Stay sinful. When I was 17, I worked at a growing retail chain called Five Below, which, as you could probably guess, only sold items that were $5 or less. It was in a small outdoor shopping mall in my town, and was only about a 20-minute walk from where I lived. I was often given the night shifts, working from at least 4 to 10:30 at night, and when we'd let out at the end of our shifts, I'd often find myself walking home. This usually wasn't too much of an issue, as I had to walk along the side of a fairly busy street. It connected right onto a Route 1, so there was always cars passing by no matter how late at night. Given that I was a petite girl and often mistaken for being younger than I am, it gave me a bit of comfort knowing that there was always a possible witness in case some late-night creeper decided to try something. However, the encounters I had were far more unnerving due to how innocent the man seemed at first. There was a bus stop right at the corner of the street, the one I'd have to turn on to take a quieter street. Sometimes there would be people sitting there, waiting for the bus of the evening, and sometimes a homeless man would use the bench as his bed for the night. He looked to be in his late 60s, had matted white hair, and only had an old torn blanket to keep him warm. He left his hat on the ground beside the bench, in case anyone with change would drop some in while walking past. I did feel quite bad for the guy, as I'd been in homeless situations before myself, but there wasn't much I could do besides drop in some change every once in a while. He'd usually be asleep when I'd pass by him, and if I had money, I'd drop it in. One night as I passed, he turned suddenly, facing me, and his gray eyes seemed to just look right through me. "Spare change." His voice croaked quietly, and his eyes shifted to the empty hat by the bench. I began searching my pockets but found that I had nothing to offer. I awkwardly rubbed the back of my neck and shook my head. "No, I'm sorry, I don't have any." His eyes narrowed at me and I could sense great malice behind the stare. It was so intense that it made me freeze momentarily. He snatched the hat off the ground and placed it back onto his head, grumbling angrily. He then sat up and pointed a finger at me. "Not everyone is as lucky as you, girlie." He spat and seemed to be getting himself more and more upset. My nostrils flared up and I picked up the strong scent of alcohol, but I couldn't spot a beer bottle anywhere. I guess he'd used the money people gave him earlier in the evening to drink at the bar down the street. I felt really uncomfortable and just wanted to get far away from him, so I waved to him apologetically and wished him a good night. He mumbled something in response, but I couldn't make out what it was, and as I turned onto the more secluded street, I decided I was no longer going to walk on this side of the street, at least not at the dead of night. I didn't see him again for a few days after that, and when he was there, he'd watch intently as I crossed the street. His eyes would follow me the entire time until I disappeared around the corner. Things took a turn for the worse one of my last weeks working there. I was walking home one night to find that there was construction on the side I usually took, which meant I'd have to walk right past the bus stop, and of course the old man was seated there, downing a bottle of what looked like whiskey. As my form became more visible from the lights surrounding the bus stop, he smiled, a creepy, off-putting smile. I could already feel that gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. "Aren't you a pretty little thing?" he slurred, as it seemed he may not have registered that we interacted before. He scooted closer on the bench and I could smell the alcohol stronger now. He had to have been drinking at the bar again, and someone must have given him a bottle to go. I really couldn't be sure. In his drunken haze, he points at the familiar hat on the ground, and I already knew what he wanted. Luckily, I had about $2 in cash in my pocket. I pulled it out and threw it in, smiling awkwardly. He didn't bother looking down, and that smile he had on his face only seemed to widen. It was almost predatory, as though I was a fresh piece of meat on display at the grocery store. The feeling in the pit of my stomach told me to keep walking, and I wasn't going to ignore it. I wished him a good night and went on my way, and I felt his gaze follow as I turned the corner and onto the next street. This would have been the time where I would plug my earbuds into my ears and drown out the world on the rest of my walk home. But as I reached into my pocket, I realized I had left them at work. I was annoyed at the time, but it really was a blessing in disguise. I trudged on down the street, admiring the many leaves that scattered the ground. I was pulled from admiring the colors by a loud clinking sound. It sounded like metal hitting the pavement. I peeked over my shoulder immediately, but saw nothing. I was the only one walking. I assumed something fell into someone's driveway. I looked ahead and continued walking, this time a bit faster due to being spooked. As I got maybe another 15 or so feet, I heard another clink, except this time it was louder and closer than before. I paused and turned around swiftly, feeling that familiar feeling knot up in my stomach. There was no one on the sidewalk, no one in the driveways that I could see. My eyes began searching about, and I was becoming more and more paranoid. As I was about to give up and turn back around, I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Across the street, crouched behind a parked car, was the old man from the bus stop. His gray eyes peeked at me over the left side of the trunk, watching intently. My eyes instantly widened in horror, letting out a scream and beginning to sprint as fast as my legs would permit. I could hear loud footsteps following close behind, and I was too overcome by fear to scream again. I turned the corner onto the next street, hearing the old man scream after me. His words were slurred, and I couldn't make out what he was saying, but his voice was getting closer to me, which meant he was closing the gap between us quickly. I was starting to lose stamina and realized I might not be able to outrun him. The fear of what he was planning on doing with me brought me to tears. As I felt myself slowing down, I prayed, but wasn't sure if that would even work. I'm not a religious person by any means, but it felt like the only thing to do. And then, as though it were some kind of miracle, a car turned onto the street and began making its way down, lighting up the street beside me and behind me. The homeless man was caught dead in the headlights, stopped almost immediately. In the corner of my eyes, I saw that in his left hand, he was holding an old Swiss Army knife. The person driving must have caught on to what was going on and began beeping their horn at him, which seemed to have freaked him out. He began taking off in the opposite direction, disappearing into the dark. I took that opportunity to run across the street and all the way home, being sure to lock the door behind me once inside. Everyone was asleep in the house, and I tried to remain quiet and not wake them, but I couldn't help but eventually breaking down, letting the whole realization of the situation crash into me all at once. I was really lucky to have gotten away from him, and I had no idea what the hell he was planning on doing. I barely slept that night and told my family what had happened in the morning. My brother believed the man wanted to rob me, despite the fact I had no money on me, except the $2 I gave him. But something about that smile on his face gave me a whole different idea of what he may have wanted. I didn't see the man after that night. I assumed he picked a new bus stop to sleep at since the incident. I also no longer walked home alone either. I always had a coworker drive me home or walk with me, but I'll never forget that night. Never walk home alone. You never know who may want to join you. This actually happened to a friend of mine. She used to live in an entirely different town when she was younger, and her closet had this strange door in the back of it. Well, whether it was imagined just due to her being a child at the time, or if it really did happen, she started to hear noises coming from behind the door whenever she went to bed. She told me that several times she tried telling her parents that she was hearing these noises, but they never believed her. So some time goes by, and one day her parents get a call from the police because they just arrested a homeless man. This was not just any homeless man though. This homeless man was living in some sort of tunnel that goes straight to that door in the back of her closet. So every once in a while, for whatever reason, this man would come through that door and watch my friend sleep in her closet. My friend was visiting family in the States. They lived in a rural community of Maine, and one morning she woke up before everyone else and decided to go for a run. After 30 minutes, she turned back and started noticing a van following a few blocks behind her. She thought it was strange, so started turning down a few streets with the van following her every move. She started sprinting and the van sped up to match her speed. She ran to the first house she could find and started banging on the door. No answer. She hopped the fence and started banging on the back door of the same home. The dog in the house started barking at her, but no one answered. She jumped into the empty pool in the backyard and hid while dialing 911. A car parked in the front of her house, and a man started calling out to her, offering her a ride home. The dog in the house was now barking like crazy, and the man left after about a minute. Police showed up and took her back to her family's place. She gave a report and they identified the van from a nearby HVAC business. It had been stolen earlier that day. This couple had a huge tree in their backyard, and it started to smell and ooze. They had arborists come in and look at the tree, but no one could figure out what was wrong. The couple decided to have the tree removed one day. When the branches started coming down, a body fell out. A homeless woman was sleeping in the tree and had died. Her body had been decomposing for ages. My friend came home from school one day to find that her house had been broken into. She decided to go inside and look around while she called her mom. She was done looking at the second floor when she made her way to the stairs. Her mom convinced her to go outside and wait for the police, who she had called. Later on, the police asked the family if they owned a crowbar. They said they didn't. They then said it looks like the offender was still in the house when she got home, and that they were waiting at the top of the stairs with the crowbar. My ex-wife and I woke up in the middle of the night to find all of our lights out in the house. We had not lost power. The living room light that we always leave on overnight had been turned off. The bathroom nightlight was removed and placed under the sink. The computer had been unplugged and the monitor cord was unplugged and neatly folded on the desk. All of the doors and windows in the house were unlocked, undamaged and standing wide open. Our bedroom door was open and the TV we always fall asleep to was turned off. Nothing was taken. Our cats were both hiding behind the refrigerator and stayed there for most of the day. Whenever someone came and knocked at the door, our larger cat would start to growl and stare at the door from then on. She no longer does this after we moved. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weekends when I was very young, because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up until dawn. But of course I always ended up sleeping on the couch because Nick at Night made me tired. So one night I wake up to this prickly feeling, like an instinct. Just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of the trees. In the perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in the fucking tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run into my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there was a strange person outside. Dad grabs something for defense and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hot head. I tremble in my mom's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and to go to bed. I decided to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister in as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We are all still, and I finally think I can sleep. Nope. I notice the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a shush signal and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the story selection tonight. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. The link to my email is in the description box below as well. Be sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't. And I want to say a special thank you to my true loyal followers that actually finished the entire video. This one's for you. Till we meet again, stay sinful. Ha 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 ha.